life had finally clicked into place. Not in some fairy tale, happily ever after kind of way, but a solid, grounded, I can breathe easy way. The promotion at Paradigm Tech was a game changer, validating years of grinding and late nights fueled by lukewarm coffee and sheer willpower. Finally, my efforts were recognized, and the financial boost allowed me to ditch the cramped downtown apartment and trade up to a sleek BMW X5. Black on black. My pride and joy. It symbolized more than just a car. It represented the culmination of my hard work, a tangible reward for overcoming obstacles and pushing through the noise. The gated community in Oak Creek was a stark contrast to the chaotic energy of the city. Manicured lawns, quiet streets, and a pervasive sense of, well, normalcy. It was exactly what I needed. A sanctuary where I could recharge, focus, and not constantly be bombarded by the relentless energy of urban life. I imagined weekends spent grilling on the patio, maybe even planting a small vegetable garden. Simple pleasures, something I hadn't allowed myself to indulge in before. Then came the women, or rather, re-entered Brianna. Just the name sent a shiver of annoyance down my spine. Our year-long relationship had been a roller coaster of dizzying highs and soul-crushing lows. She was vibrant, captivating, and undeniably charismatic, but also deeply insecure, prone to explosive outbursts, and perpetually seeking validation from any source she could find. The breakup, though inevitable, had been messy. I'd tried to let her down gently, explaining that we were fundamentally incompatible, but she refused to accept it. The texts, the calls from burner phones, the social media stalking, it was a constant undercurrent of anxiety, a reminder of the chaos I thought I'd escaped. I blocked her number countless times, adjusted my privacy settings, even considered changing my phone altogether. The silence of the past few weeks had been a welcome reprieve, a fragile hope that she'd finally moved on. That hope was shattered the moment I posted a picture with Sarah, a colleague from work that I had started seeing. It was just a harmless picture from a company picnic. But that's all it took to awaken the beast that was Brianna. And then there was Karen. My neighbor, across the street, a walking, talking stereotype. Her beige SUV was always parked perfectly centered in her driveway. Her lawn was meticulously maintained, and her eyes, constantly peering from behind her blinds, held a perpetual air of suspicion. From the moment I moved in, I felt her disapproval, radiating across the street. Our first interaction was a masterpiece of microaggression. As I wrestled a heavy box of books into my new house, she emerged from her perfectly symmetrical rose bushes, her voice dripping with condescension. "Are you making deliveries, dear?" she'd asked, her eyes narrowed in judgment. The insinuation was clear. A young black man moving into a nice neighborhood, he must be doing something shady. I'd bitten my tongue, offered a curt explanation, and retreated inside, the seeds of resentment already sown. I knew she wouldn't let it go. I could just feel it hanging in the air. The peaceful suburban life I had envisioned was already under siege, and I hadn't even unpacked all my boxes. The stage was set for a collision, a perfect storm brewing on a quiet Sunday morning. Sunday mornings were sacred, a time for reflection, for planning the week ahead, and, most importantly, for hitting the gym. That ritual usually started with a strong cup of coffee and a quick scan of my emails on the front porch, enjoying the crisp morning air. This particular Sunday, however, was different. As I stepped outside, mug in hand, something felt off. A subtle dissonance in the otherwise harmonious tableau of suburban bliss. It took a moment for it to register, for my caffeine-deprived brain to process the horrifying reality unfolding before me. My X5, my beautiful black-on-black X5, leaning at grotesque angles, its tires deflated, lifeless. Not just deflated, but slashed. Deep, jagged cuts, deliberately inflicted with a sharp instrument. It was a brutal violation, a visceral assault, on something I had worked so hard to achieve. A wave of anger washed over me, quickly followed by a sickening feeling of helplessness. This wasn't some random act of vandalism. This was targeted, personal. And then I saw the spray paint. Stark red letters emblazoned across my pristine driveway like a declaration of war. Cheater. The accusation, dripping with venom, confirmed my worst fears. This was Brianna's doing. Her signature brand of theatrical revenge. But the level of malice, the sheer audacity of it all, felt different. More calculated. More sinister. That's when I looked up and saw her. Karen, standing on her porch, arms crossed, a sickeningly smug smile plastered across her face. It was a look of pure, unadulterated satisfaction, as if she'd personally orchestrated this entire ordeal and was basking in the glory of her twisted victory. Her eyes gleamed with a malicious delight, a silent confirmation that she knew exactly what had happened, that she had been waiting for this moment. The pieces started to click into place. Brianna, fueled by jealousy and rage, wouldn't have known where I lived. She wouldn't have had the nerve to pull something like this off without some kind of encouragement, some kind of accomplice. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Brianna and Karen. Two women from completely different worlds united by a shared desire to inflict pain and chaos on my life. It was absurd, almost comical, yet terrifyingly real. I felt a profound sense of betrayal, not just from Brianna, whose actions were sadly predictable, but from Karen, who had cloaked her prejudice in the veneer of suburban respectability. The quiet peace I had sought in Oak Creek was shattered, replaced by a chilling awareness of the darkness that lurked beneath the manicured lawns and polite smiles. The smell of freshly cut grass suddenly felt acrid, the chirping of birds mocking my misfortune. Before I lost my temper, I stepped back, inside, my hands shaking. I needed proof. I needed to arm myself with facts before confronting either of them. The Ring doorbell and the strategically placed side cameras were my only hope. With trembling fingers, I pulled up the security footage, desperately hoping to find some evidence, some clue that would confirm my suspicions. The minutes stretched into an eternity as I scrolled through the hours of monotonous footage, searching for a sign of movement, a flicker of light, anything that would shed light on the night's events. My heart pounded in my chest as the timeline finally landed on the crucial hour. 2:37 a.m. The moment of truth. The grainy footage flickered to life, painting a stark and damning picture. At first, it was just the faint glow of headlights approaching my driveway. Then, Brianna's familiar silver sedan crept into view, its presence an unwelcome intrusion on the quiet suburban night. But she wasn't alone. As the car door opened, a figure emerged, shrouded in the darkness, and then, illuminated by the streetlight, I saw her. Karen. Draped in a floral robe, her hair in curlers, holding a flashlight like a conductor leading a twisted orchestra. They moved with a practiced efficiency, a chilling synchronicity that spoke volumes about their shared purpose. Karen, the suburban queen bee, surveyed my BMW with a critical eye, pointing and gesturing as if instructing Brianna on the finer points of automotive vandalism. Brianna, her face contorted with vengeful glee, produced a gleaming knife from her purse, its blade catching the moonlight like a predator's fang. With a series of swift, merciless strokes, she slashed each tire, the sound of escaping air a sickening hiss that echoed through the quiet street. Karen, not content with simply watching, offered words of encouragement, her voice a low murmur that barely registered on the audio. But the visual evidence was undeniable. She was an active participant, a willing accomplice in Brianna's deranged revenge plot. Then Brianna pulled out a can of spray paint, shaking it with a frantic energy, as the sickening red letters began to appear across my driveway, a vulgar declaration of my supposed infidelity. And then, the final damning act. As Brianna stepped back to admire her handiwork, Karen gave her a thumbs up, a gesture of approval, a seal of solidarity in their twisted act of defiance. The footage ended with them scurrying back to Brianna's car, their silhouettes vanishing into the darkness, leaving behind a scene of destruction and betrayal. The video was more than just evidence. It was a window into their twisted minds, a chilling testament to the depths of their pettiness and malice. My initial anger had morphed into a cold, calculated resolve. This wasn't just about slashed tires and spray-painted driveways. It was about holding them accountable for their actions, for violating my privacy, for disrupting the peace of my home, and for attempting to smear my reputation. I immediately called the police, my voice even and controlled despite the turmoil raging inside. I explained the situation, detailed the evidence, and calmly requested that they dispatch officers to investigate. As I waited for them to arrive, I watched Karen through my window. She emerged from her house, seemingly unfazed, and began watering her flowers, a picture of innocent suburban serenity. She pretended not to notice me, deliberately avoiding eye contact, but I could see the flicker of apprehension in her eyes, the subtle tremor in her hands. She knew she was caught. She just hadn't realized the extent of the evidence I possessed. The arrival of the police shattered the illusion of normalcy that Karen was so desperately trying to maintain. 2 uniformed officers approached my property, their presence a stark contrast to the manicured lawns and pastel-colored houses. I met them at the curb, my phone in hand, ready to present my evidence. Without a word, I showed them the security footage. They watched silently, their expressions evolving from professional detachment to growing disbelief as the depravity of the scene unfolded on the small screen. One of the officers, a stern-faced woman with years of experience etched into her features, turned to me, her eyes filled with a mixture of sympathy and righteous indignation. "We'll take care of this, sir," she said, her voice firm and reassuring. "This is unacceptable." She walked directly across the street, her purpose clear. Karen, still tending to her flowers, feigned surprise as the officer approached. She launched into a carefully rehearsed performance of innocence, denying any knowledge of the vandalism, claiming she had been asleep all night. "I have no idea what you're talking about, officer. This is a terrible misunderstanding." The officer didn't respond. She simply held up my phone, displaying the security footage for Karen to see. The color drained from Karen's face as her carefully constructed facade crumbled. She stammered, her voice losing its composure. I was just trying to help a friend." She was feeling empowered, she offered weakly, the absurdity of her statement hanging in the air. Empowered to commit a felony? The officer raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit property damage," she announced, her voice devoid of emotion. The handcuffs clicked shut, a stark symbol of Karen's downfall. Her carefully curated world began to unravel as she erupted in a tirade of accusations and justifications. She screamed about her HOA rights, falsely accused me of racism, and lamented the decline of the neighborhood. Her words a desperate attempt to deflect blame and maintain some semblance of control. The other officer read her Miranda rights, his voice cutting through her ranting. Karen was led away in handcuffs, her face a mask of fury and humiliation. The quiet street was filled with the sounds of her protests, a jarring disruption to the carefully maintained suburban tranquility. The police located Brianna at her apartment within the hour. The knife and spray paint were found tucked away in her trunk, damning evidence of her involvement. She offered no resistance, seemingly resigned to her fate. When questioned, she offered the pathetic excuse that he broke my heart, as if a shattered ego justified criminal behavior. She clearly still lived in a fantasy world where her actions had absolutely no consequences. She was promptly arrested and charged with the same offenses as Karen: criminal mischief, vandalism, and conspiracy to commit property damage. The wheels of justice were turning, grinding down the petty revenge plot that had threatened to consume my life. The aftermath of the arrests was a whirlwind of legal proceedings, insurance claims, and unexpected media attention. Replacing the slashed tires and repairing the spray-painted driveway was a logistical nightmare, but the tangible damage paled in comparison to the emotional toll the incident had taken. I felt violated, exposed, and deeply unsettled by the realization that such malice could exist within my own neighborhood. However, something unexpected happened. My security footage went viral. A friend in the media, deeply angered by what happened, decided to post the video online. It spread like wildfire across social media platforms, attracting millions of views and generating countless comments. The absurdity of the situation, the sheer audacity of Karen and Brianna's collaboration, and the undeniable proof of their guilt resonated with people from all walks of life. The story was quickly picked up by local news outlets, transforming my personal ordeal into a public spectacle. The headline, emblazoned across the local news website, was particularly memorable: Petty pair caught slashing tires in suburban sabotage, all on camera. Suddenly, I was thrust into the spotlight, bombarded with interview requests and messages of support from strangers all over the world. The attention was overwhelming, but also strangely cathartic. The outpouring of sympathy and outrage validated my feelings, confirming that what had happened to me was not just a neighborhood dispute, but a blatant act of injustice. Karen and Brianna, once anonymous perpetrators, were now infamous figures, their names and faces plastered across the internet, forever associated with their act of petty revenge. The social pressure was immense. Karen, ostracized by her neighbors and facing mounting legal fees, put her house on the market just 2 months after the incident. The sight of the for sale sign on her manicured lawn was a bittersweet victory, a confirmation that her actions had consequences. She retreated from the neighborhood, her carefully constructed facade of suburban respectability shattered beyond repair. Brianna, facing similar social ostracization and legal battles, retreated into silence. The constant stream of online criticism and her impending court date had apparently finally humbled her into some sense of shame. The 2 a.m. texts and random calls from fake numbers ceased. She disappeared from my social media feeds. The legal proceedings dragged on for several months, culminating in a plea deal that saw both Karen and Brianna convicted of criminal mischief and vandalism. They avoided jail time but were ordered to pay restitution for the damages to my car and driveway, and were sentenced to community service. The judgment was a small consolation, but it was enough. The scars of the incident lingered, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of suburban life. The initial months after the ordeal were marked by a heightened sense of vigilance. I upgraded my security system, installed additional cameras, and became hyper-aware of my surroundings. I started parking my X5 in the garage, no longer willing to leave it vulnerable to future attacks. Over time, however, the anxiety began to fade. The neighborhood returned to its normal rhythm, the memory of Karen's reign of judgment and Brianna's act of vengeance slowly receding into the background. New neighbors moved into Karen's old house, a young couple, excited and open to making friends. I made an effort to connect with them, to build bridges and foster a sense of community that had been so tragically disrupted. The experience, however, forced me to make some life-altering decisions. I also started seeing a therapist, a decision I should have made long ago. The therapy helped me process the emotional trauma of the incident, to understand the motivations behind Karen and Brianna's actions, and to develop healthier coping mechanisms for dealing with future conflicts. I used to think therapy wasn't for me, but it turns out that having a trained professional help me sort out those feelings I neglected for years was more than helpful. It was necessary. Moreover, the incident served as a powerful lesson about the importance of documentation and accountability. The security footage was instrumental in bringing Karen and Brianna to justice, and the viral attention it generated helped to expose their actions to a wider audience. The experience also reinforced my belief in the power of sharing stories and standing up against injustice. Ultimately, I emerged from the ordeal stronger and more resilient. I had faced adversity head-on, armed with evidence, composure, and a refusal to be intimidated. I had reclaimed my peace of mind, restored my property, and reaffirmed my faith in the power of justice. The moral of the story, as I often tell people, now is simple. Don't mess with someone who has receipts, cameras, and absolutely nothing to lose when it comes to exposing your crazy. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply living well and documenting everything. I still live in Oak Creek, and while the incident changed me, it didn't break me. I learned to be more discerning about the people I surround myself with, to be more proactive in protecting my privacy, and to never underestimate the power of human pettiness. The black-on-black X5 remains my pride and joy, a symbol of my resilience and a reminder that even in the quietest of suburbs, drama can strike at any moment. But now, I am ready. Life goes on, and I face it with my head high, my cameras rolling, and my receipts at hand.